As I begin this video blog this morning, this is what it looks like outside. I'm in Portland, Maine, and I spent just about all of my life in the South and finally made it up here to New England where I feel at home, but I certainly haven't lost the sense of wonder and awe at looking at snow, so I enjoy it every time. It's a little tricky to drive in and particularly to walk in when it gets icy, but it's a blast, I think. Now, the number of people watching this blog has gone down from like 20 down to 6, the last one was. And I understand because it's pretty much the same old, and people have seen it and well, okay, there's more interesting things out there. And there's a part of me that, the advertising part of me, the entrepreneur in me that wants to try to maximize the interest for other people. So I want to present the most, interesting and unusual and sensational things. And I want to space my blog entries apart so that people don't get too used to them and so on, the marketing side. And then there's the part of me that's defiant that says, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to do what I want to do and what I feel inspired to do, and it's up to them to realize that it's worth looking at, Well, that part of me won out this morning, and I'm going to do the unthinkable. I'm going to read poetry at some length, okay? But I'm going to read, as I have been, from the original texts, and this is by Abby Poyen Whittier, Mathew Franklin Whittier's first wife, his beloved soulmate. And she is now my wife in spirit, see? So now I've automatically lost, half of my audience. But the controversy here is that her poetry was falsely claimed by a fellow named Albert Pike. It's a long story. I could go into the proof, and someday I may, but I'm kind of feeling like not with this one. Plagiarism was a terrible problem in the 19th century. Anybody who did excellent work and didn't put their mark on it was likely to be plagiarized. I don't think it was uncommon. I don't think these are exceptional examples. I think these are two young people that were convinced that it was virtuous to remain anonymous. And as a result, people stole him blind. Well, Albert Pike stepped in and claimed Abby Poyen's work. They had the same initials. Near as I can tell, I can't absolutely prove it, but I can pretty well extrapolate it, that when Abby was 13 and 14 in 1830, possibly going back as early as December of 1829, she took one of his classes. He was teaching a class in Newburyport, Massachusetts. She was in East Haverhill, Massachusetts, not very far away. Maybe she roomed with a family, maybe she traveled, I don't know. But anyway, she was in that class. And he would take her poetry and submit it to different publications. And in the meantime, Mathew, who was 4 years older and was her student, she was teaching him because she had had a good tutored education, see, as an upper class girl. So Mathew apparently submitted some of her work also. And then later on, after she died in 1841, about 9 years later, he started publishing her work posthumously. And a couple of those were poetry. Those we definitely know are hers. And they're also signed AP. There's a whole series of short stories and 2 poems and 1 essay in the Boston Weekly Museum, starting in 1849, I believe. And the first one, a story called Mary Mahoney, is signed AP, the same as all of the poems that Albert Pike stole. Meanwhile, when Albert Pike submits to that publication, and I think it was 1850 or 1851, he signs with his full name, see? So this AP in the Boston Weekly Museum is definitely Abby being submitted posthumously by Mathew. It's not Albert Pike. Well, the early poems were Abby's also. Some of them were submitted by Pike as his own, or I think he submitted them knowing that if he got caught, he could say, oh, I was just submitting them for Abby Poyen. But then if he didn't get caught, which he didn't, he could claim them for himself. And that's the way it's gone down in history. It's very convoluted. I've delved into it deeply, as you can imagine, and I've caught Albert Pike a couple times red-handed. Um, but we can take these poems that Mathew submitted or that she submitted herself, and we can compare them to the ones that Albert Pike submitted. Now, Pike reworked these things and published completely reworked versions years later under his own name. But the early ones that came out in like 1830, he may have tinkered with them a little bit. There was a whole series called the Hymns of the Gods. And I think he wrote some of those himself. What he says he did, and not in this class, but in an earlier class, he says that he wrote them himself at his desk while he was teaching the class. He's a heck of a liar, this guy, by the way. You may know him as a Civil War general for the South. His statue was famously pulled down not too terribly long ago in the protests. And you may know him as a leader of the Masons in the 19th century. He was an ass, basically, with pretensions to mysticism. Well, he apparently got that from Abby, who was a real mystic at age 14, see? Anyway, what I thought I'd do is read some of these poems, not a lot of them. I think I'll read 3, and I may read them in their entirety, which is why I'm totally flying in the face of any kind of marketing savvy that I might have. I don't care, basically. You can stick around or not. We may get 6 for this one because they want to see what I'm doing, but we may get 2 for the next one. So what I'm going to do is start out with the later poem. I want to establish what Abby sounded like when it was definitely her. Okay, so let's see. I've got my glasses in my pocket. I've really given up on trying to be an appropriate, host on these things. I'm just going to be myself. Now, I figured out the hard way here trying to read these poems that if you really want to read poetry properly, you have to read them first and get acquainted with them, and then you won't stumble over things, Well, I'm too lazy for that. I wanted to get right into this, so I have not done that. That means that I'm going to hit things that I misinterpret and that I stumble on and so on, and, my bad, but here we are. This is in the December 7, 1850 edition of the Boston Weekly Museum, which is a little tough to show to you, but there it is. And it's on the front page. It's the second poem. And it's signed by the author of Mary Mahoney. Now, all of these are signed that way. So only the very first one in the series is signed AP. Excuse me, I'm looking down at the picture. All the rest are signed by the author of Mary Mahoney, but effectively it means they're all signed by AP. This is called A Noonday Cloud. All throughout our pasture grounds, over field and meadow, in the quiet of the wood, in busy haunt, in solitude, sleepeth somber shadow. Whence cometh it, this sober shade, thus everywhere so surely laid? What mystery has thus endowed with seeming life a fleeting cloud? The mystery of life's best trust, the spirit of all grace, a providence apparent still in every earthly place. Could even sunlight be more fair, were sunlight only in the air? And should we value turf or bloom, did never desolation come? Had life no shadows, earth no blight, could we half measure life's delight? Indeed, indeed, a logic lies of gravest depth in clouded skies. Now, this would have been apparently written at a period where things were difficult for Abby, whether it was a health problem or something between her and Mathew, who knows? But that was her response, and it's not trite, actually. People can say things trying to be deep, and it ends up being trite, but this is not. She's really saying that life requires this balance of pleasure and suffering and happiness and pain and so on in order to appreciate, It's something that it took me a while to really understand. And it came to me in kind of a flash I'd been into photography and did my own printing, many years ago. And I realized that if you have only white, you don't have a picture. The only way that you have an image at all is if you have dark and light. So the same insight. So that's Abby, okay? And we know for sure that's not Albert Pike. Now, this is a much earlier volume. This is the 1830 Philadelphia album. Now, the album changed their name a little bit. And this book belonged to McAllister John Dick, it says on the front. It's embossed. So this was probably no cheap publication. Here's what their front page looks like, if I can show it to you without damaging it. Let's see, there it is. So I'm already at 10 minutes. This thing's going to be real long, this blog. I'm just going to try to bore you guys to death. This is let's see, I got to go back in order to find the date. August 28th, 1830 edition. This is signed AP, just like the others. It's called Summer. And this will give you an idea. I don't think Albert Pike got his fingers into this one at all. That's my feeling about it. The print is very small. I'm going to have to really concentrate on this. You're going to get to see a lot of my bald head here, I guess, unless I tilt it up. There's a quote. I don't know who it's from. It says at the top, "Summer is come, all pleasantness and sweet winds." It would probably be interesting to look up where that quote comes from, because then I find out what Abby was reading at the time. I'll read this. I may read the whole thing. I don't know. I'll just see how I feel about it. "The summer is fair in the sunlit air and the distance of the sky." I'm going to break off and say something. In one of my blogs, I mentioned that Mathew wrote a letter to the editor of the Waverly magazine in 1853, chiming in where there was a debate about whether Edgar Allan Poe plagiarized Mr. Chivers, Thomas Chivers, when he wrote The Raven. And Mathew chimed in, signing as his secret pseudonym, a star. And he talked about originality. And he also made a secret reference to Abby. He said P always loved the mockingbirds. Well, P was Poyen. P was not Poe. And he meant that Abby always loved the mockingbirds. And then he said that some poets could write. Essentially, he said in code, all poets can't write in different styles, but she could. Okay, we won't go into that any further, but these are going to be examples that Mathew basically wrote in 1 meter, but Abby could write in a whole bunch of different styles. Well, that's all I wanted to say about this, is that she can write in different meters and different styles. "The summer is fair in the sunlit air and the distance of the sky, and merrily and sunnily the winds blow low and high. The south's at rest, and the bright pure west, and the wind that dwells between, in the leafy bowers where the silver showers and the winds from heaven lean, and wander through, and distill a dew on the lips of the waving leaves. And the cloud floats low, and slow the sun his mist veil weaves, like an ardent lover to spread it over the brow of the silent moon. And there comes a wind, and its tracks we find at midnight or mid-noon. A charm it brings with its unseen wings and its slight and dewy feet, and every flower with a golden shower of love its fingers greet." Shall I go on? I'm feeling the magic of it as I read it. I hope it comes through to you. I got a shiver while I was reading. "The bland southwest comes on the breast of the cloudy and stormy sea, and leaves it as calm with its silent charm as the upper heavens be." I'm pausing because I can't read this. "It comes on the dells, and the flower bells under its feet look up, and it shakes a dew of a silver hue on every fairy cup. It comes on the hills, and the summer rills are leaping faster along. It holds its wing over birds that sing, and they chant a merrier song. Its pinions are bowed on the idle cloud, and its fervors of warmth and love waft it up in the sky till far and high it floats like a white-winged dove. It comes on the eye where the fever mists lie and spurns them away from their throne, and lights it again with a constant rain of love and light alone. It waves its wings with hidden springs of dewlight over the brow, and leaves it as bright as the pure delight of the clouds that run and bow before the car of the burning star that we have named the sun. When the early dawn of the blushing morn his journey has begun. The winds are here, and bright and clear the blue sky looks about, like a great sea, and silently the winds go in and out. And cloudy isles with sunny smiles are sailing on its breast all over that ocean with a gentle motion and a state of moving rest. The bright sun shoots on the flowers and fruits his hot and life-winged shafts, and of colors and dew, as his beams fly through the air, he takes rich draughts. And his light is asleep on the hills and the steeps, on the green plains and the dells, on the ocean waves, round the hidden eaves, with its brightness and its spells. And at coming of night, with a fainting light, the moon steals over the sky, and, like a maid, one half afraid, looks down with a timid eye. At night or noon, by sun or moon, beauty is everywhere. And summer is bright and happy and light, and sunny and very fair. Now, Abby, she would have been 14 when she wrote this. She's deeply mystical, very much ahead of her time, brilliant, deeply sensitive. Obviously, she's a girl. She loves the stars. She loves the heavens. She loves nature. This was not written by Albert Pike, the hunter who went on to fight as a general for the Civil War and became a high-ranking Mason whose teachings are rather shady, and who admitted that he plagiarized everything in his major work for that organization. If you get into the preface, he admits, practically brags on the fact that he plagiarized a whole bunch of different people. This is not written by Albert Pike, okay? I don't know if any academics are going to be reading this, or rather watching this video. You guys are so stubborn. You see something in black and white, or a reference and a footnote, and you swallow it whole and repeat it as though it's fact. And don't you understand that not everything in print is fact? Don't you understand that there was as much fake news in the 19th century as there is today? It's a hoax. Albert Pike stole this stuff from one of his students. And he himself admits he was never able to write poetry as good as what he wrote early on. Anyway, I've exposed him thoroughly in my books, but there is an apocryphal statement recorded in one of the biographies of Albert Pike, and that person says, dismissing it as he quotes it, that some unknown New York literary man said that Pike was a great plagiarist. Well, Mathew was a New York literary man for many years. I'm guessing that was he. But he kept under wraps. Now, there's a whole series that Albert Pike, actually his claim to fame, the Hymns to the Gods, and there's a whole series of them. Again, I think Albert Pike stuck his dirty thumb in some of them. I think others are just as Abby wrote them. I have one precursor, which I'm not going to read here. One of the Hymns to the Gods is to Somnus, but I found an earlier one published anonymously for her by Mathew in the New England Magazine that clearly is a precursor to that. Okay, it's called To Sleep. It's not to any god. So what would happen is Pike would give these assignments in class, and Abby, they were reflective of his earthly consciousness, and Abby would make of them something spiritual, okay? And then he would steal them, publish them, and write his own, or write stanzas, insert his own stanzas, and his would be worldly and hers would be ethereal. And it's obvious which is which. All right. Now, we are in, I think this is the September 11th edition, 1830. This one is signed AP. This is from the Hymns to the Gods. This is called To Neptune. But this is not a version that Pike later completely rewrote and published, like in the 1850s or whenever it was, or later. This is the 1830 version. Now, whether he sent this in, I'm guessing he did, or whether Mathew sent it in for her, which he may have, because there's some of his work reprinted in this newspaper. I don't know, but I'm going to read at least some portion of this. This is obviously about the sea, the god of the sea, and what she's doing, of course, is contrasting the sea's violent moods with its calm moods. So she starts out, God of the mighty sea, wherever now the waves beneath thy brazen axle bow, whether thy strong, proud steeds, wind-winged and wild, trample upon the waves about them, pulled by the strong storm god, whirling thy swift car each way among the winds that near and far yell out for pleasure, tossing crested foam upon their floating mains and on their sides of glossy blackness, God of the torn sea and stormy waters, thou from whom ships flee or sink into thy waves, God of the mighty storm and of fierce winds that on the ocean swarm, God of the roar, the foam, the thunder crash of angry waves, the low and sullen clash that waters make, while far beneath they flow over some storm wreck. We thy great power know, and call thee to our offering. Come and drive thy chariots to our shore, and see us strive to do thee honor. Come with thy fierce crowd of fleeting winds, O God, most strong and proud. Abby could write like this with force also. Wasn't just about summer. Perhaps thou lettest now thy horses roam upon some quiet sea. No wind-tossed foam is now upon their limbs, but leisurely they tread with silver feet the sleeping sea, fanning the waves with slowly floating manes, but late storm-driven. Haply silver strains from trumpets spirit-blown about thee ring, and green-robed sea gods unto thee their king sing loud in praise. Apollo now doth gaze with friendly looks upon thee, and his rays light up thy steed's wild eyes. A pleasant warmth is felt upon the sea, where fierce cold storm has just been rushing, and the noisy winds that Eotus within their prison hinds, I don't understand that, flying with misty wings, perhaps below thou liest in green eaves, where bright things glow with many color. Many a monster keeps his watch anear thee, while old Triton sleeps as idly as his wont, and bright eyes peep upon thee every way as thou dost sleep. Perhaps thou liest in some Indian isle, under a waving tree, where many a mile stretches a sunny shore, with golden sands heaped up in many shapes by naiads' hands, and blushing as the waves come rippling on, shaking the sunlight from them as they run and curl towards the land, like molten gold, thick set with jewelry most rare and old. And sea nymphs sit, with small delicate shells, make thee sweet melody, as in deep dells we hear of summer nights by fairies made, the while they dance within some quiet shade, and sound their silver flutes most low and sweet. In strange but beautiful times, their light feet may dance upon the bright and misty dew in better time. All wanton airs that blew but lately over spice trees now are here and wave their wings, all odor laden, near the bright and joyful sea. Oh, Wilt thou rise and come from them to our new sacrifice? AP. I don't think Albert Pike, the Civil War general, wrote that. Abby loved the stars. She was very interested in nymphs and naiads and fairy beings, as I could demonstrate by another poem from the museum, where as a child she says she went looking for them in nature. She spent all day looking for the fairies, she said. And she'd come back and her mother says, where have you been? And she says, I was looking for the fairies, you know. So this is Abby. There's no question about it. Now we move to the, what edition is this? There's some tears in here. I have to be very, this is a very well-preserved album. I mean, there's a couple little tears in it here and there, but my gosh, this thing's in beautiful condition. This is the December 11, 1830 edition. Here's an illustration, by the way, of three men facing a rattlesnake. Looks like, I don't know if I can get it up to where you can see it. Beautiful stuff. You know, in the days before photography, they really took some care with these images. This is called a sketch. It's signed AP, and I have to give some background for this one. In 1830, Abby was Mathew's student. Even he was a very bright farm boy, and he desperately wanted an education. He couldn't get one, so he ran away from home. But she offered to pass on her European-style tutored education to him. If any of you are scholars and you know that girls of that era in America were only taught to sew and play piano, she was raised in a French family. Her father was a marquis, and she would have been given a European education. Now, in Europe, the girls were taught everything. So just in case any skeptic has a thought about that. But Mathew had for some years been in love with a local girl. I think it was Evelina Bray, who comes up in the Whittier lore, because I think she was very cute. Apparently she was a flirt, and she probably dated just about every guy in the territory, okay, including John Greenleaf Whittier, who supposedly was kind of half-heartedly interested in her. Well, I think Mathew had a thing for her, and he was serious. He was completely serious about it, and she was just kind of stringing him along because he was 2 years younger, but he was tall. He was probably, mature for his age and handsome. So she kind of toyed with him, see, and he took it seriously. Well, Abby could see it very clearly. As a matter of fact, in one of her short stories, which is clearly a reference to Mathew, she refers to this girl as the coquette of his idolatry, the coquette of his young idolatry. See? So she was quite aware of what this girl was about. I think this poem is written to him in warning. It's a cautionary tale in verse. So that's all I need to say about it. She's only called it a sketch. I have a tale. She's in love with him already. She's already decided at age 14 that they're going to be married. Okay, I've got plenty of evidence of that. He just doesn't know it yet, see? So, I have a tale to tell thee, love, beneath the boundless heavens, when nothing hears but the brooding dove amid leaves moonlight riven. The glow-worms shall our tapers be, hiding among the vines, like diamonds in a still green sea, their light with moonfire twines. Now you see, I mean, if the poetry is Abby's and not Albert Pike's, you will see stars, you will see the heavens, you'll see celestial things. See? So this is clearly Abby. I have tale when winds are still and cannot tell a word, when the starlight stays like a frosted rill upon the bright green sward, when far away over hill and dell the anthem bird doth float, and light leaves tremble to the swell of the plaining echo note. A tale of a strange wild youth is it, who lived as one asleep, as a lark upon a hill alit, doth dream in shadows deep. As the surface wakes that sleeping bird, as the sunfire wakes that sleeping bird, a spirit raised the youth, and love among his heartstrings stirred in tenderness and truth. A spirit passed him like a dream, a bright and joyous maiden, an eye of deep, proud sunlight gleam, a brow with beauty laden, a tone as soft as flutes at eve across a still lake playing, a smile like those which fairies weave amid bright dewbells straying. The mist that curls at sunset's flame from evening's brilliant hair marked out unto his eye a name amid its gentle glare. The sunset bore it on his brow, the ocean on his foam. 'Twas written on the noonday glow and on the midnight gloom. A face was with the deathless fires that flame on heaven's cheek, and blushed amid the cloud-built spires with loveliness most meek. It gazed at him from twined leaves from under the stork-dove's wing, from browned autumn's heavy sheaves and the delicate flowers of spring. He heard a voice on the fainting winds, the breathing of the deep, the plaining song that treetops find the while they sit asleep. It rang out from the valley pass, from dim and gloomy grove, and echoed in the humming grass like bugles blown by love. It clung unto the sea wave's song, the stream's most gentle stress. In every sound it passed along with gentle loveliness. And so he lived in deep delight and ecstasy of love, like one whom on a moonlit night a happy dream doth move. Then when the moonlight wanders low and faintly tints the stream, passing the leaves with winding slow and melancholy gleam, and waning stars sit far apart, and joy her light is gone, I'll tell thee how she spurned his heart with cruelty and scorn. And that a frowning face looked out behind the lightning's blaze, with gleam like one in deadly rout, and eyes of savage rays. It gazed from each storm-ridden cloud that brooded on the sea, and from the joy-robed moon it bowed in scorn and tyranny. And how a laugh of cruel scorn rang out from stormy waves, and deep, dull lakes, all life forlorn, and dark and death-damp caves. It echoed from the eastern blast, it shrieked behind the thunder, and when upon the sea he passed, the voice was taunting under. Death came and whispered in his ear, the voice spake of that tune, and made to him with sickness sore a melancholy moan. And so he floated to the sky, like mist drifts at the morn, with broken heart and sunken eye, and frame to thinness worn. A.P. So that was Abby's warning to him. I think he was trying to get over her at this time, and she was in love with him, so she was trying to explain to him what this girl was really like and really about and what was happening to him, and that it wasn't his fault, and that he, had mistaken her coquettishness for real love. Albert Pike had no reason to write a poem like that. There's no context. And this is what I find when I study these plagiarists and the works that they plagiarize from both Mathew and Abby. They have no context. And sometimes they try to make up one. When Poe wrote his essay, The Philosophy of Composition, that's all that was. He was making up a phony context whereby he might have plausibly written The Raven. And it's all BS. The whole thing is brazen BS. And yet, again, I'll address you directly if any academics are reading this, and yet 95% of you guys have bought it, hook, line, and sinker. And I get quoted that, like when I post about Poe online, and there's the ability for people to leave comments, they'll dismiss it and saying, oh, Poe said in his Philosophy of Composition that he wrote it, see, and they think they're real smart because they know about that and they think I don't. It's so frustrating. Anyway, that's a sample of Abby's poetry. I have maybe 20 of her poems, something like that. The ones that may have been submitted by Albert Pike, it's not totally clear where he might have stuck his ugly thumb in them. There's one, which I wish I had in front of me, but there's one where it talks about a goddess, I forget which goddess it is. And Abby's poetry is light and ethereal and feminine and talks about the stars and the heavens, as we've seen here. And then Pike puts his stanza in there, and it's about a drunken Bacchus, or Bacchus, I don't know how you pronounce that, a drunken Bacchus riding, taking a joyride in a chariot with a goddess, see? Well, that's Pike's mentality. Abby would never have written about a drunk Bacchus riding, in a chariot with a goddess. See, so he stuck that in there. He didn't have the capacity, and he didn't really even try to make his poems match her style, except in the kind of, he kind of could fake the general tone of some of these things, but it's so obvious. And what I find with these historical issues is that the fact that somebody has claimed it seems to have some kind of thraldom over people. They see it in black and white. They see that the person has claimed it. They see that when anybody stood up to protest, that the famous person has scornfully, dismissed the challenges, and they buy it. Or those scholars who have bought it somehow or other predominate. They have the degree, they have the status, they have the access to publishing, and they have come down in history as the authorities. So if there were scholars that believed the people that protested, they don't seem to have lasted or been prominent in any way. So what we have, apparently, just as one sees in the people who've studied ancient archaeology, what we have is a myth. The official version of 19th century literature is every bit as much of a myth, as the official version by archaeologists of what happened, 10,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago. It's all wrong. So here I am. I actually have evidence for this. So I'm starting, again, put in another plug, in Real Paranormal Magazine. It's a brand new e-zine, which is coming out with its second edition in the end of, the end of February or beginning of March. I have written what I hope, if the whole thing is printed, is like almost a 40-page article, or it might even be 50-page article, like 49 pages, huge, explaining and presenting my evidence that Charles Dickens couldn't possibly have been the author of A Christmas Carol, and showing that I can come very, very close to proving outright that Mathew and Abby Whittier were the original authors. I really go into it, and I'm real pleased. I've literally gone through 30 drafts or so with this thing or more. So I've got the evidence. I'm presenting the evidence. But of course, I have no academic standing. See, I'm not in academia at all. I'm completely outside, which is the only way that anybody could do this kind of work. You can't do this work inside of academia for obvious reasons. You'll get fired. You won't get published. You'll be scorned. You'll be laughed at. You'll end up, selling real estate or something. You won't even be in academia. By definition, nobody in academia can do this kind of work, because if they try to do it, they won't be in academia anymore. Now, I have seen little hints, like apparently there are a few scholars who don't believe that Poe was serious when he wrote The Philosophy of Composition. They can't quite bring themselves to say that it was BS, like I do, but they think he was joking or something, okay? That's a good compromise, So there's a few people that have questioned it. And there's people that are seriously questioning Charles Dickens now, because Charles Dickens is being revealed as a real ass, okay? A man of very poor character. And it's manifestly impossible that he could have written A Christmas Carol within 6 weeks in a fit of spiritual inspiration if he's this kind of an ass, Nor did he get corrupted that much from 1843 until, the 1860s or 50s, whenever it was. So the whole thing is a house of cards, the official version of Charles Dickens and Edgar Allan Poe and Albert Pike and others. Margaret Fuller. I haven't seen that anybody has suspected Elizabeth Barrett Browning of being a plagiarist, and she was awful. but she was also a very poor liar. Of the 5 that I've just mentioned, she was the worst liar, except that she told her lies in private to her friend, Hugh Stewart Boyd. But he saved the letters. So we can get into those letters and see these ridiculous lies that she was telling him and then swearing him to silence. See, it's obvious. It's just flat out obvious. So how long is it going to take for somebody outside academia who is not taken seriously to just keep presenting the truth over and over and over until somebody notices? Well, I'll tell you, somebody's noticing, because in Academia EDU, where I upload my academic type papers, 92 people now have read my overview of Matthew Franklin Whittier's True Legacy. That paper's called An Overview of the True Literary Legacy of Matthew Franklin Whittier. So far, I think there's 92 reads on that. Somebody's reading. Nobody's writing me. Nobody, so far as I know, is citing it. Nobody's, calling me on the phone and inviting me to speak in their classes, which should be happening. If somebody comes up with a discovery of that magnitude, they should be getting calls. So everybody is kind of curious. What the heck is this? And then they pass it along to their friends. And have you seen this crazy thing? And they read it. But see, the soup is spit in. Once somebody reads that, the soup is spit in. Okay, they can't forget it anymore because it's true. Okay, so, and I've got the evidence on top of that, which I don't think I present in that. That's just an overview, but I've got the evidence for these things. Well, the evidence is coming out in a series of articles in, of all things, Real Paranormal Magazine. Then it gets reposted in Academia EDU, which is keyword searchable, and we'll see, because it's there. You can lead a horse to water. You can't make him drink, but you can make the water available. So we'll see who reads it. That's all. I never know how to wrap these things up other than to always say thank you for watching. But those few of you who are left, and the few of you who will watch the next one after having been burned on this one, which was all poetry and ridiculously long. What am I at? 40, almost 43 minutes this thing is. Nobody's going to watch to this stage. So if you are still watching now, which probably I've lost every single person of the 6, who have an interest in this blog, the evidence is coming out, and we will just see. I'll just keep putting it out there and putting it out there. Again, thank you for watching.